Whenever I go back in my past, I get emotional. That's the thing. Whenever I had bleed, I used to question myself, ki, why me? As everybody goes through the things. Why God has given it to me?
I think for a lot of us with bleeding disorders, especially when we're coming to terms with our medical diagnosis, our minds are constantly getting pulled in two distinct directions. The frustration and anger that this is happening to us, and the drive and the joy in the discovery of who you really are. It's that pull of why me and why not me? That yin and yang of the physical pain that comes with having a bleeding disorder versus the emotional endurance it gives you to go out into the world and achieve your dreams. That's why I was so excited for this podcast. Two distinct voices from two different parts of the world with two very different stories, but even though they might sound completely different from the outside, they both show off that dichotomy and show a universal truth for all of us in the bleeding disorder community. Our stories are one of perseverance, and even as we accept who we are, that part of us is still inside, still fueling our story. My name is Chris Bombardier, and I'm a mountaineer with hemophilia. From 2011 to 2018, I successfully climbed the 7 summits, the tallest mountain on each of the 7 continents. But I'm not the only one with a story to tell. This season, we're talking with inspirational people all over the world who've navigated their own bleeding disorders and embraced who they really are. Now they're on their own journeys to achieve what many have called impossible. This is the Final Summit Season 3, Climbing Your Own Mountain. On today's episode, why me? Why not me?
This next segment is brought to you by Genentech. When you're in need of support along your hemophilia A journey, talk to a Genentech account and community manager, or an ACM. ACMs offer one-on-one support about a treatment option and can help you understand insurance coverage options. It's important to note that ACMs are Genentech employees and do not provide medical advice. Talk to your doctor if you have questions about your treatment. Know that when you're connected to an ACM, someone is in your corner. Sign up for one-on-one support from your local account and community manager at www.talktoanacm.com.
I'm Dr. Vyankatesh Pralikar. I'm 34-year-old now. I'm in Kolhapur, Maharashtra, that is in India. I'm a pediatrician by profession and person with hemophilia type A, severe.
My name is Michael Hargett, and I live in Vancouver, Washington. West Coast is the best coast for sure. I have hemophilia A severe, and I moved up to Washington State right before the pandemic.
I'm wondering if you could start at the beginning and tell me about how you were diagnosed with hemophilia and just how that impacted your family and you as a person with hemophilia.
My formal diagnosis was done when I was 12 years old, but informal diagnosis, clinical diagnosis was done at the age of 6 months. I was 6 months old. I had a swelling in my knee. I was consistently crying, and that time my parents noticed that I wasn't putting weight on my knee was swollen, and they took me to a family physician who knew my maternal grandfather had hemophilia. He had symptoms of hemophilia. He had knee swellings, and that is why they knew it kind of hemophilia, and that's why they said, this is hemophilia only. You treat accordingly, and you have to go to Mumbai for the treatment. But that time we didn't have facilities to travel and availability of treatment and some financial issues. And my family accepted the diagnosis, but 12 years of age, we never took a formal treatment because the thing was that there is so much of lack of knowledge, basically.
And what was that process like? Do you remember it even?
100%. I have a scar in the back of my head to prove it. So when I was born, I broke my mom's tailbone. And so I had to sit in the ICU for 24 hours and verify that I wasn't going to bleed to death. And so what ended up happening was one of the doctors said I was okay to go home. And one of the nurses, who I still keep in contact with today, she's retired, but she's my angel on earth. And she said there's not something quite right with this baby. And it turns out that I ended up having to drain a liter of blood at 2 days old because I had a hematoma from breaking my mom's tailbone.
Another thing was that we were misinformed that if you take the factors, he will develop antibodies, he will develop inhibitors. And as of now, after subsidence of the swelling, he's able to walk and do some stuff. But if he develops inhibitor, he won't be able to do anything. So that is why, because of that misinformation, my parents never took me back to Mumbai till my final. After even diagnosing in 2000 at 12 years of age, I wasn't taking any treatment till I was diagnosed with the nasopharyngeal angiofibroma. So this thing, because of the lack of knowledge and misinformation, my parents took to me so many places like temples and so many holy places, so many quacks also, and eventually we didn't get the result. But thankfully it didn't harm me.
And so I have this nice sexy scar in the back of my head that sometimes when I'm in a bar or something, I'll just make up cool, like I'm in an action movie.
And action.
And I scaled the Empire State Building and do all this stuff because it's definitely noticeable if I cut my hair. So then people always be like, hey, what's that from? But it's all those things that I feel like that my hand was dealt to me at 2 days old because of the trauma that I happened, that I had my cards were already dealt right then and there.
The thing is that in my younger age, whenever I had bleed, I used to question myself, why me? As everybody goes through the things. Why God has given it to me? Why am I the only one who is suffering from this? And what have I done wrong? And why my parents are also suffering? Like when you have a bleed in your joint, you didn't take any medications and you are having pain, you can't sleep in the night, but you can't cry at the same time. Because you know that if you cry, if you make a noise, your parents will not sleep. Eventually, they have throughout the day, they have suffered, they have worked, and then they have come home. And if you cry again, then it will trouble them. So you are hiding your pain. And I didn't have any goal at that time because I didn't know what to do.
Yes, it's really crazy because I have vivid memories of going into the hospital. I was born in 86, and so I was on the tail end of the Hep C, and I would have to go in. I had multiple blood transfusions as a kid. And so I was positive for the antibodies for Hep C in 89. And then I got diagnosed with actual Hep C in 92. And so that was definitely hard because as a kid, you never think that's what's going to happen and transpired. And being 6 years old and having this disease, I had no clue what was about. But in the meantime, I was still trying to develop friendships and go to school and be as quote unquote normal as any other kid.
In my school days, I just felt that I wanted to attend my school. I wanted to play the sports like other children. I was treated differently. I was treated specially. I never attended any training in the school, physical training or any part. But the thing is that till 10th, I felt I'll finish my education and I'll get some government job basically. That time also I felt I have to get some financial stability in my life. And hopefully I was wondering whether there will be any miracle to cure my disease.
I remember this vividly in middle school. A nurse would come in and they'd roll out the cart that has the VCR player and the TV and they roll it in. You were like, oh my gosh, it's movie day in class. Nope. That was not my scenario. They'd come in, have my PT. I've had a couple nurses that would come in from class to class of every class I was in, and they'd show slideshows and presentations of this is what a bleed looks like. This is what hemophilia looks like. How do you help someone with hemophilia? Will he bleed out? Like all these things. So everybody already knew, and I didn't even have a choice. Everybody knew, and that's when the bullying started as well.
Like any child feels some miracle would happen and he feels that I have done something wrong, that's why I'm suffering. That was the feeling, and didn't have any specific goal at that time. I felt I could do something that will heal everyone.
That was a huge thing, and I have so many memories of different things. The biggest joke as a kid was if I got cut with a butter knife, would I die? And it was just all those little things that added up. There was a point where I couldn't even try to just go to class because everybody would be like, oh, don't touch Mike. He's super fragile. He'll bleed. And so that took a huge toll on my mental health.
Yeah, I was definitely more secretive, I feel like, about my bleeding disorder. I wanted to keep it a secret from my peers, but there was no way to keep it completely secret. I would show up to class one day on crutches and they'd be like, "What happened?" And I would try and be like, "Well, I twisted my ankle," or whatever it was. But then 2 days later, I would not be on crutches and they're like, "Why aren't you on crutches anymore?" And kids would call me faker and all those things. So finally, in 5th grade, I don't know if I agreed to it, but my nurse came to school and did a presentation. And I was like, okay, maybe it'll get better because people will understand. And then it didn't quite go that way. Because then I felt like people had treated me completely different. It was they didn't want to touch me. They didn't want to treat me the same way, call me bleeder, which I ended up owning that later on as yeah, whatever, I'm bleeder. But there was a moment where I was like, don't call me that.
Of course.
Everyone used to tease me. They will name things about my physical impairment, all my problems. But my parents never said a word and they never blamed me for anything. Even if because of my bleed, I had a swelling in joint or anything, my father never shouted at me for that cause. They were basically completely worried what will happen to him after us. They were not worried about anything else. What will I do? What will I become? What will I do in my life? I was relatively overprotected in my family, that I was never allowed to do certain things. And basically that was the question always in their mind. Now they are quite relaxed. Okay, he has done something in life, so they are not worried about me now.
For most of my life, I viewed hemophilia as a huge weakness. I felt like it meant I would never be good enough because I had this condition. During that time, I felt alone. I wasn't connected to the bleeding disorder community. I felt alone in my struggles. No one really knew what a bleed felt like, and I didn't want to explain it. I downplayed how serious it could be. I would joke about being a bleeder, but those jokes were just a facade, a defense mechanism, a way to not feel judged. I wanted it to disappear and gave it the least amount of energy as possible. I didn't think that would ever change, but it did, finally. But it wasn't overnight. It took a while. It started to change when I first met someone else with hemophilia around my age. It was an instant connection, and I immediately felt like I didn't have to hide anymore. I realized that by opening up about my bleeding disorder and being proud of what I could still accomplish, I wasn't a victim anymore. Instead of ignoring infusions or hiding when I needed to do it, I just took agency and did it. This also increased my confidence and helped me believe I could do more. That hemophilia wasn't something holding me back. It was something moving me forward and helping me build resilience. At what point did your mind identify that you wanted to become a physician and take care of people? When did that click in your head? This is my dream. This is my goal.
People felt it crazy because I had already, usually in India after 12th, we give the exam for medical school. And I passed in 2006 my 12th and I got admission in 2011. There's a 5 years gap. I completed my diploma and I was home for 2 years. I couldn't even pass that graduation course other I had taken admission, because I wasn't attending it. So people felt that you are not able to pass this course and how will you be able to enter there, and then forget about completing the course. But my family stood with me, my brother, my parents. They said, okay, give a shot. It's fine. Even if you fail, there is nothing to lose. So you try and I gave the exam, and because of the disability concession quota, I got the admission in the medical school.
I wanted to be a physician for the longest time to help cure hemophilia. That was my longest dream. And then it was going to school to run a hospital, because I'd been in hospitals my whole life. So it just seemed second nature. And so I was going to school at the time for hospital administration. But as a kid, I thought that I always wanted to go to culinary school. That was my thing. I can remember I made a video in 8th grade, and I still make this cheesecake to this day, but I make a chocolate chip cookie dough cheesecake.
Oh.
And I had to do a presentation on it. Yeah, it's wicked. It's so rich and disgusting, but it's so good. And so I had to make this presentation. And so I did a tutorial video, like I do cooking demos in 8th grade. And that was when I knew I loved the Muppets and like the Swedish Chef as a kid. He looked like he had so much fun doing what he did. I'm like, I want to do that.
Then when I got the admission, people were doubtful ki, okay, many talented people fail in the exam, medical school. It is a 5-year hardest course. How will you compete? You have not studied at all and you have never done anything good in your life. On top of that, you have problem. People like close relatives also felt that he won't be able to succeed.
I always joke that I'm a cook and I play with knives for a living, and I still wouldn't have it any other way. I've been cut so many times and used electrical tape to syringe my fingers and all this stuff. I had to learn how to have a healthy relationship with food, to use food in a positive way. After I got diagnosed in high school, I had mono and it attacked my heart. And that's when I got diagnosed with cardiomyopathy. That was my heart condition pre-transplant. And so I still, even as a big guy, I had to be eligible to get a transplant. I lived with a sick heart for almost 10 years. I realized even with my sick heart, I started cooking in restaurants sophomore year in high school. I started at a little mom and pop pizzeria, worked myself up to an Italian restaurant. I worked in the dishwasher at the time, and one of the line cooks called out, and I was always shadowing the cooks to be like, okay, one day when a cook calls out, it'd be like, I know what he's doing. So I jumped on the line, they gave me a chance, and I never looked back. But there was some time when I was working, and I was working full time, that I was killing myself, but I didn't know that because my heart was so sick.
Yeah.
But it was inevitable that I was still going to do the things I wanted to do, even if I needed the transplant. So I realized that, I'm sure my mom wasn't too happy, that going through getting the associates, I did not get my associates, but I realized that if this is what's going to happen, if I need a transplant, I'd rather be happy and not do something that is just status quo. You know, I feel like in the hemophilia community, you go to high school, you go to college because you need good benefits, you get married, and you do that whole like house on the prairie thing. Like it's just you just have to do it because that's what you've known.
Yeah.
But I was like, no, I don't fit into any mold figuratively or literally. And so I need to do what I want to do. And so I quit school. I enrolled in culinary school the next week, and then the rest is history.
There was never a doubt about that. I knew that I have come here and I'm not going to give it up. I'll complete it. I knew that. It might take time. I knew that. Suppose if I'm not giving some exam, I'm missing some exam, that is fine. But it will never happen that I will leave this course. I'm going to do it. That I knew.
Like day one in school, I had an ankle bleed and it was sporadic. Didn't do anything. Just woke up on the wrong side of the bed and tweaked it. And I had an electric wheelchair at the time because I just got my ankle fused and a synovectomy at the same time. I don't ever recommend doing those at the same time with both ankles. It's the dumbest thing I've ever done, but I'm grateful that I have it. But I had to go into culinary school in a powered wheelchair, and they adapted. They knew that I could try. Yes, it probably wasn't going to be like that. I couldn't take a wheelchair into a professional kitchen, but they were trying to help me. And that's when I knew is that I just have to be the best advocate for me as I can.
I knew I have so many people to support me, and it doesn't matter I'm getting bleeds. It is not a new thing for me. It will take us some time. Like once in final exam of my second year, I left questions because of a sudden bleed in my right elbow. And I started writing with the left handle. So I knew that I'll complete it.
That's amazing. You just taught yourself English. You taught yourself how to write left-handed. Whatever it took, you were going to make it happen.
I can't hide anything. People are going to either like me for me with my bleeding disorder or without. And I still have to do me, at the end of the day. So I had a lot of ups and downs in that regard. I had so many cuts, and especially in school, learning how to hold a knife and chop and saute. I've had so many burns, all these things. But, I say like chicks dig scars, and my arms were all bruised up, and I'd make up these cool stories about, I was slaying away on the stove is called the piano. And so you're playing with 6 different pans at the same time. And that's, to me, is like the rush. You're doing so many different things at a time where it's so much fun. And you get lost in the dance of it all. And then 6 hours go by. But that's where the ups and downs of culinary school comes into play because of the fact that I still had to be me, but be a good advocate, because there were those times of getting cut, coming in a wheelchair, also coming in crutches, and then sometimes not coming in at all.
Yeah.
And then I have to hustle and catch up on homework. But in a culinary school, you can't cook at home and get credit. You got to be in school. You know, it's one of those things where there's only so much reading you can do. It's more on the job and seeing it done.
I want to know what it felt like when you found out that you successfully completed your study and like you were going to become an official doctor. How did that make you feel?
I didn't feel that I achieved something big at that moment. I knew that after finishing my MBBS, that was not the last step. I wanted to do post-graduation. I wanted to do specialization. But I realized, okay, from the place which I had come from, starting my medical store, which was not working, I was earning merely something. And from that, I came to be a doctor. And from sitting on the beds in the KM hospital to joining the KM hospital as a doctor, that was a great feeling. And more than me, I saw the pride and happiness in my parents' eyes. They felt okay, we were thinking, what will he do? And I was feeling that I am the burden to my family.
That was one of the coolest and best days of my life, because all the ups and downs, the plans, the bullying, the sacrifices, the bleeds, the hospital visits, treating Hep C, getting past that, the relationships I formed, the hardships I went through, the emotional taxing of everything that I went through. I graduated with honors in culinary school, and I walked across the stage, and that right there, I can't even put it into words. That was like winning the lottery. You know, it's like, I did it. I didn't give up. I showed that I have the tenacity and strength because of the tools that I gained and the knowledge from having a great team in my treatment center, great friends that truly just believed in me and saw me for me, my teachers, my coworkers, my bosses, my chefs, everybody that I went through believed in me and saw my passion, and the passion for food that had nothing to do with me as a hemophiliac. I did it because I wanted to do it, and that's the ultimate thing that I love to be able to talk about, is because even with, if nobody had hemophilia, if you had other ailments, if you had other severe bleeding disorders, you had other things that you consider a disability, you only make it a disability if you let it. And that's the best part, is because when I got my diploma and I shook my director's hands, that was so emotional, but I literally laughed and I yelled out loud. And it was just, it was such an amazing experience. And I would go back and do it all over again.
It feels really nice that I knew that I will be a good person for being a pediatrician. I'll be able to understand things the parents are going through, the child is going through, and with empathy, I can counsel them. And with empathy, I can explain them the things. And like I said, I had been to the quacks and some holy places and all those things. Like the question I say, why me? Like whenever I counsel to a parent like chronic disease or some incurable disease or some disease like kind of thing, I just don't tell them your fault or something. I start counseling. You don't think about why, you think about what and how. What can we do now and how will we do it?
It's not a young man's game. It's hard work. It's overworked. It's hot, sharp edges, broilers, saute, pizza ovens. It's so much. But it's a camaraderie. You know, it's like hemophilia or like your brother and my brother being in the military. It's only certain people that can know, being in the restaurant industry, of how it brings you together. And that's the coolest part, is that brotherhood, sisterhood kept me going.
Like I said, the thing is that what we always focus on the problems. That is the problem. Like we don't talk about, we always focus hemophilia. It is the right thing that we are always, our life revolves around hemophilia. If you are doing something, you are studying, wherever you go, it will affect you. But the thing is that we can't just focus about hemophilia. We can't just focus about the bleeds. We have to think about the solutions. Like I said, we have to change the question, why me? We have to ask the question, what can we do? and how can we do. Like, first thing is you have to accept the problem that it is going to stay with you. You are not going to escape. There is no miracle going to happen. God knows something will happen with the improvement in the science. And right now we are also living better life with prophylaxis and emicizumab and all those things. But the thing is that the problem will stay with you. You have to accept the life living with it. Another thing is being ambitions and all those things, you achieving your goals, never give up. Because if you give up, that time you are not going to achieve it. People will tell you whatever. People judge you by their capability. They feel that, okay, I couldn't achieve, how could he? Know your strength, know your weakness, and accordingly you keep going and always ask for help. That is the one of the most thing, like you said, people feel difficult to ask. But if you ask for help, then only someone will come and someone will help you. Till then, you are not going to get any help. First, accept the problem. Second, change your attitude, keep the perspective that, and know your strengths, weakness, ask for help, and most importantly, keep going and you will do it.
I couldn't imagine, even if I didn't have all the things I went through, the joy that I get for cooking something and someone reciprocates that joy, or they'd be like, hey, this reminds me of my grandma's cooking.
Yeah.
Sign me up. I'm a happy man. I can die a happy man with that. That's the best compliment.
Why me? I don't think anyone with a bleeding disorder has gone through life without thinking those words. But the next step is a huge one. How do you shift that attitude into, why not me? Don't get me wrong, the why me is always going to be a part of us. I'd be lying if I said it goes away completely. But it's a matter of embracing it as part of your journey to acceptance. When I started my journey of the 7 summits, I didn't ignore my bleeding disorder. I knew that if I ignored it, I wouldn't be able to make it up 1 mountain, let alone 7. But at the same time, I knew that if I just sat there wondering why I alone had to deal with it, I'd never be able to take that first step. It was about finding the balance, that little sweet spot that exists when you accept who you are and let it fuel you. It was a matter of learning who I was and accepting it, then taking the steps I needed to go the final mile. On next week's episode, we're going international and talking about how you define yourself, taking that first step. I'm Chris Bombardier. Until next time, keep climbing your own mountain.
The Final Summit is produced by BloodStream Media. Learn more at bloodstreammedia.com. This episode is hosted by Chris Bombardier, written by Dru Johnston, edited by Greg Bernard, produced by Keith Corneluk, executive produced by Patrick James Lynch. The Final Summit was also made possible by support from Genentech. Visit genentechhemophilia.com to take a look at how they are supporting the hemophilia community.